Okay, kiddos, I want you to take this first paragraph, please, and pause the video and just take a minute to read through it and then come back to me. All right, so the analogy in this first paragraph that you want to remember is that direct quotations are like helium balloons. They have to be connected to an introduction or an explanation, most often an introduction, in order to make sense in your writing. All right, your goal is to merge your own words, your own viewpoints, your own thoughts with the words from your source materials. The novel, in this case. Moving forward, we will use additional sources. So your goal is to merge your words with your source materials and key word here is smoothly. All right, just think of it in terms of merging with oncoming traffic. All right, you want to merge smoothly into the oncoming flow of traffic. If you do not, you crash. That's not what we want with your writing either. All right, more importantly, you don't want it when you drive. But of course, you know what I mean. All right, so how do you go about, say, for instance, finding a quotation in the novel that shows what you're talking about? Okay, you've done that. We've practiced that a couple times, and we'll look at an example coming up. But what's the next step? Well, putting it in your writing. How do you do that? All right, so today we're just talking about direct quotations. We are not talking about paraphrase and how to work a paraphrase into your writing. We're only talking about direct quotations. And I bought this handout years ago, and I love it, and we'll use it throughout the next year and a half of school when you're with me. All right, there are 4 ways for you to integrate directly quoted material from your sources into your own writing. All right, and the first one is to introduce the quotation with a complete sentence and a colon. The job of a colon is to introduce. And in this case, it would be introducing your direct quotation. So here we have some examples, and they're all from Thoreau. And you will read Thoreau when you are juniors. Rest assured that within the next couple days, we'll actually look at a paragraph that I wrote based on the quotations you gave to me during class one day. I wrote a paragraph wherein I include direct quotations, and it's a paragraph about the Hunger Games. So if these examples leave you still a little puzzled, not quite certain, we are going to look at more examples. So this is just a start, all right? Now, your introduction has to provide a little bit of context. Your introduction, in other words, should provide a little information about why you chose this direct quotation that you have introduced with a complete sentence and a colon. All right. In this case, in this first example, this author is telling you why he or she chose the direct quotation that's coming up, So let's look at it. In where I lived and what I lived for, Thoreau states directly his purpose. So right there, we know that this direct quotation contains Thoreau saying, this is why I went to the woods, because the author tells us that in this quotation, directly stated is Thoreau's purpose for having gone into the woods. All right, Thoreau left society, went and lived by himself in the woods, and this is why. So notice that the introduction already gives some context. Why was this chosen? What can we expect from this upcoming direct quotation? And here it comes. Thoreau said, I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. So this is the passage where Thoreau says, here's why I went. All right, this is his purpose. And the author in this introduction, that is a complete sentence and is also followed by a colon, this author tells us, here's what you can expect. I've taken this direct quotation out of context, but this is where he tells us why he went to the woods. So this author, his introduction or her introduction, helps us understand the reason for the direct quotation. Let's look at the next example. Thoreau's philosophy might be summed up best by his repeated request for people to ignore insignificant details of life. Okay? This is his philosophy. In short, it's summed up by the fact that he repeatedly tells people to simplify, ignore the insignificant details of life. Again, the author in this introduction is giving us context. And we've talked about context all year. This person is saying, okay, I took this direct quotation out of the larger piece of literature, but here, let me tell you a little bit about why I chose it. This direct quotation, in short, gives us an idea of his philosophy, which is that he wants people to simplify, ignore insignificant details of life. Don't get caught up in them. And then there's the colon introducing and right to the direct quotation. And you can take a minute to read through that. Pause this at any time. Okay, this next one, Thoreau ends his essay with a metaphor. So this direct quotation contains a metaphor, and this author afterwards is probably going to go on to explain the significance of that metaphor. The bell scared me. My line got a little crazy there. All right, Thoreau ends his essay with a metaphor. That's a complete sentence, and here it comes. Okay, now keep in mind, this is a colon, 2 periods. You're using a colon, not a semicolon. Don't get confused. Kids get confused about those. Okay? All right. Let's move on. I had some blank pages in there in case I needed them. So method number 2, right here, is we introduce, and we still need to provide some context with that introduction. Give your reader a little bit of an idea about what you were thinking when you chose this quotation, or why it is important, why you chose it. And in this case, though, it's not a complete sentence. Not a complete sentence. So usually in this case, your introduction ends with a verb And then the punctuation that separates the introduction and the direct quotation is a comma. And you'll have a space there. And then begin your direct quotation. So in these examples, you're going to notice it's the same idea over and over and over. This first example, in where I lived and what I lived for, and that was the name of his essay, as you can see is enclosed with quotation marks. Thoreau states directly his purpose for going into the woods. Okay, we read that earlier. We talked about how that provides context. The difference here is when he says. Adding that makes this introduction, it's no longer a complete sentence. And then you see the comma. Now, in this case, your verb is says. A verb is what you do. Thoreau says. Okay? So in this case, our introductory phrase, which is an incomplete sentence, ends with the word says, comma, there's a space, and then the same direct quotation is used. So you want a little variety. You can see maybe if you compare this example to the first example for method number 1 on the last page, you can change your method pretty easily with just, in this case, the addition of 3 words or the omission of 3 words, okay? Now, this next one is a little bit different from the last time we looked at it, but Thoreau suggests the consequences of making ourselves slaves to progress when he says. Now, for the sake of example, right now, it's fine. We keep using the verb says. In time, I'll give you a short list of verbs, and eventually I'll give you a longer list because we don't want to overuse the same verb, in this case says, over and over and over, because we want variety in our writing. Now, here also you're going to see 2 methods, or 2, they're not methods, 2 ways of wording that are frequently used and fall into this category because in the case of this example that I'm pointing to in blue, Thoreau asks, well, where's your verb? It's right there, and then there's your comma. All right? And then I'm sure this would be followed by some sort of discussion about his philosophy. And also used often, I'll highlight in green here with the arrow, according to Thoreau. Okay, in this one, the introductory phrase does not end with a verb, but it falls into this category because it is still separated from the direct quotation with a comma. Okay? Clear that screen off if ever you need to. If ever you need to pause the video, go ahead. I'm trying to figure out how to use this eraser. I'll try this one. Yeah, that's not what I want. Okay. It's good enough. So, moving forward, the third method. In the third and fourth methods, you do not need punctuation of any sort to separate your introduction and the direct quotation. In these cases, and I'm not going to go through each one, you can pause the video and read through them. In these cases, the comma is replaced with the word that. If you have the word that, you need no punctuation. And that is the difference. Okay, now this third example is different, but it's still, there's your verb, argues, but argues that eliminates the need for the comma. Now this last example, I don't want you to look at for right now. Don't look at this one. I kind of grouped this one into the next category, which is when we just weave our own words with direct quotations and we don't need punctuation or anything. Okay. Skip my blank pages. Oh, good grief, where'd it go? There it is. All right, so this is method number 4, and these I call snippets. And I love them because you only use the most significant keywords and phrases. And you don't need any separation by punctuation. So stylistically, it's the smoothest merge that we can come up with. So look at your examples. Thoreau states that his retreat into the woods around Walden Pond was motivated by his desire to live deliberately and to face only the essential facts of life. We didn't need to use that big, long direct quotation that we saw before. And this enables us to rely most heavily on our own words, on our own voice, and rely less on our source's words. It's just more efficient. So here's another. Let's look at that. With the blue arrow, Thoreau argues that people blindly accept shams and delusions as the soundest truths, while regarding reality as fabulous. So you can see you can do this several times in a sentence. And it's just more economical. And it prevents us using the ellipsis, which we'll talk about later, but you know already the ellipsis is used to show when we've taken something out of a direct quotation. Notice here, they're not using any ellipsis. And you can go ahead and pause it and look at that last example. And I will let you go, and I will see you later.